Okay, so this Egypt mission, or this Giza mission, there have been a number of them, but, well, there's probably two of relevance. One was in the 1800s when we left from the 1960s. It would have been sometime between 63 and 67. It was before the Monowitz regime, which happened in June 67, so it was before that time. And then another one was in 2002, 2003, somewhere in there, which was a Kyle mission. And the one in the 1800s was an Alex mission, and Alex and a group of other kids, there are probably about 40 of them or so, were walking around on the Giza Plateau on the surface, overseen by this officer and by our usual overseer, who was a teenager at Camp Hero. All the overseers were teenagers who had been brought up there, usually. And we were walking around using our abilities to find things underground, bits of technology and so on. And the 2002 or 2003 one is a Kyle one, where we reclaimed the gate from the Syndicate, it's actually kind of its own story, so we'll go into that some other time. That'll be in volume 4 of the book, actually, so we'll get into that when that book comes out.
And how did you find out about what was under the Khafre pyramid?
Well, this group of kids, we were collectively using our psionic capabilities, and we were focusing on this underground portion. We were doing essentially a mass remote viewing and also a mass sensing. I'm sure there's a more technical term for it, but I don't know what that technical term would be. We called that a conference call. What we found immediately was the gates and other bits of technology down under there. And after some digging revealed that there was the plateau there blocking the way, the stone of the plateau, and the floors of the pyramids were covered over completely, we realized there must be something underground. And so some ground-penetrating radar equipment of some kind was brought in, and they found the shafts and the city in relatively decent detail.
And how did you access the underground?
Well, initially via a small tunnel boring machine, which was set up quite a long ways along the plateau, away from the pyramids and away from everywhere where it might ever be seen in history. And I think it was eventually filled in again, but they wanted it completely away from where anyone would have a chance of seeing it. And we burrowed under there into some tunnels which led all around under the plateau, probably about 50 feet, 100 feet underground, leading to rooms under the Sphinx and under different parts of the plateau. We didn't explore that much, but we did camp out in a room under the Sphinx. And eventually we found a passage that had access into the shaft leading underneath the Khafre pyramid.
How long did the descent take? How wide was the spiral staircase? And what was on and around the pillars?
There were some things on and around the edges of the pillars or the edges of the staircase. There was art there. We weren't paying attention to that, though, because we were trying not to fall to our deaths. These staircases were plenty wide enough for us to walk down, but there was no railing. There was only the wall and then the stairs jutting out from the wall individually, not in a block. They were individual stairs jutting out from the wall, and no railing on the other side. So there was this massive well down into the bottom. And it was, an incredibly long fall, and these stairs were ancient. So this was incredibly dangerous undertaking. And so that descent took hours and hours. It felt like much longer, but it probably wasn't. And we had flashlights and so on, so we weren't paying attention to what was on the walls. We were just trying not to die. And exactly how wide it was, I'd say each of the stairs was probably about 30 feet wide, the few unbroken ones. Most of them were broken to some extent.
What was at the bottom of the well? And how big is the space down there?
What was at the bottom was a city, a pretty good-sized city that ran all along underneath the plateau and the Giza plateau, and actually probably quite a long ways past it. We didn't explore most of it. Our focus was on the gate and the area around the gate. And so that it's a humongous space, really, and the ceiling of it was about probably about 800 feet off the ground. It's a humongous area, and like I said, we saw very little of it, but eventually they set up lights in there somehow. It's very fragmented memories, and also we were on whatever drugs they had us on. I think bromide or something, so that we would be complacent and not paying attention to our surroundings and not feeling an urge to resist, or that sort of thing, which we were always kept on, and we were actually required to take a regiment of that even when we were on missions for decades. That's a whole other story, but yeah. So there were lights brought in, so we could see the proportions of it pretty well.
Did you find out where the Stargate led to? And did you turn it on?
Yeah, we did. And we did turn it on. They had a tall white come in and rig it up so we could turn it on. Again, I don't know how they do this, but they did have that done. And we found that it led to a pretty well uninhabited, by the point we got there, planet, at least in the proportion that we saw. And it was pretty Earth-like desert planet. It also had a whole lot of pyramids and Egypt-like things there, much bigger than the ones we have here, although the ones we have here are probably the smallest examples of what was once in Egypt. Egypt probably once had even more megalithic things than what's there now, and those were probably destroyed. And so it was determined that this was a progenitor or ancient builder race outpost from back when they still existed. We did not get to see any of the actual excavation that I am certain went on to occur there.
Were there any other interesting artifacts there besides the Stargate?
Yeah, there was one weapon we found. We called it the Spear of Destiny, or the project people called it the Spear of Destiny. It looked like a spear, but it was much larger. It was clearly made for a giant, and it would shoot out a plasma beam in front of you that would go up to like a half a mile up ahead of you. And so you could just aim that and wipe it once and take out an entire battlefield in a few seconds. So they certainly weren't letting that go. And we found some of the ancient power battery node things, which I've mentioned before, that everything in Atlantis was powered by, which were they looked like large marbles, they glowed inside, and they were compressed stars. We found some of those, and we took those back too. And where they wound up being distributed to, of course, I have no clue.
What happened to the Stargate and the city after? Who worked there the last time you heard anything about them?
Initially it was just a dig, and it was probably part of this mercantile period, because there were Prussians and some Americans being shown around this place by the time we left. And I remember hearing talks of selling it back to the Egyptian government eventually, to the Nasser government, who worked very closely with Project Phoenix. And so that must have eventually happened, because the government was working with us when we reclaimed the gate, because at some point the gate was seized by the Orion Syndicate. But in 2002, 2003, thereabouts, the Medusa unit were commissioned to help the Egyptian government reclaim it, and we were commissioned to do this by Nachtwaffen. So it's all I guess it was a three-part venture to reclaim this place from the Syndicate, and we did. So the last time I was there, which was in 2002 or 2003, it was under the control of the Egyptian government and their SSP. But who knows what might have happened to it since.